Hi everybody, welcome to this month's Flameside chat here at Center College. My name is Jamie Powell and I'm your host for the evening. And today's topic, eagerly awaited and appropriately timed for what's going on in this country, is about the madness of the NCAA. And we're going to be talking today with our very own Dr. J, Dr. Bruce Johnson. Dr. Johnson has been the James Graham Brown Professor of Economics at Center since 1992. He joined Center's faculty in 1987. He graduated magna cum laude from Transylvania University and earned a PhD in economics from the University of Virginia, which I'm pretty sure they're no longer in the tournament, but we won't talk about that. Dr. Johnson is an expert on the economics of sports. His articles and reviews have been published in a variety of academic journals, including the Journal of Sports Economics, and he has been interviewed on sports economics topics in the mainstream media, including interviews with abcnews.com, cnnmoney.com, the LA Times, and the Christian Science Monitor. So in just a moment, I will turn things over to Dr. Johnson to begin his opening comments. But first, I want to remind everyone who's watching that we would like these chats to be interactive and we welcome your questions. So please comment in the YouTube comments or tweet your questions to #Flameside, all one word. All right, and with that, I'll turn things over to you, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Jamie, and welcome, sports econ fans, to the friendly confines of Krauts Hall on the campus of Center College. It is March Madness time, and we're going to talk about not so much what goes on the court, but what's going on around the courts and actually in the courts with various antitrust cases and labor law cases which are working their way through right now. I've got some slides that I want to share with you in my opening comments just to sort of set the stage, let you know how much money is involved, where it's coming from, where it goes to, and so on like that. So I'm going to try this screen share here. Let's see. How do I? Here we go. So, economics of the NCAA, which could mean no cash, amateur athletes. So it's March Madness time. So let me jump right into it, start talking about money. March Madness is pretty lucrative for the organization known as the NCAA. It's in the middle of a 15-year contract with TBS and CBS to broadcast the basketball tournament every year. They're going to collect nearly $11 billion over the 15 years. It's an average almost $800 million a year. Most of that money goes to the NCAA to fund their central office operations, championships, and the non-revenue sports in all three divisions and various other things. And if you wonder how can TBS and CBS afford to pay $800 million a year for these broadcast rights, this year alone they're getting about $1.15 billion for the ads they're selling for this year's tournament. In addition to all that money, they've just started the college football playoffs, and ESPN is paying about $8 billion over the first 12 years for the playoffs themselves and for various other major bowl games like the Rose Bowl and so on. And the way that they're going to share the revenue with the schools is about, on average, this is going to be about $7.5 million per year for each of the 65 schools or so in the power conferences and Notre Dame, and about $2.6 million a year for the other schools that might play in bowl games, the other FBS schools. In addition to all that money, the power conferences have pretty lucrative TV deals of their own. This diagram here shows what they're getting under their current contracts per year. So the ACC schools are getting $17 million a year. The Big Ten and the Pac-12 schools are getting about $20 million a year. Poor old SEC shows up at a little under $15 million, but don't worry. Under their current agreements with their TV networks, by 2017 and 18, each SEC school will collect about $40 million a year. Okay. In the meantime, also set for a big raise, you have the Big Ten schools. In 2017 and 18, they're going to be collecting about nearly $45 million a year for their TV rights. So let's take a look at the revenues being generated by NCAA schools. And this bar graph here is showing revenues for FBS schools. That stands for Football Bowl Subdivision. These are the football schools that are eligible to play in bowl games. And it also shows FCS schools. FCS stands for Football Championship Schools. They don't play in bowl games. They play in the football playoffs and what used to be called Division I AA. So, for example, FCS schools include Eastern Kentucky University and Murray State University. The FBS schools include Alabama, Auburn, Southern California, schools like that. And you can see what's happened to their revenues over the last decade. Pretty dramatic increases in the FBS. These red bars represent the total revenue generated by the top revenue generating school in Football Bowl Subdivision. And I can tell you that in 2008, 2010, and 2013, that was the University of Texas in each of those years. The blue bars show the amounts generated by the median school in the FBS. So school number about 62 or 63, and you can see they make a lot less, but that still has risen from about $20 million in 2004 to about $40 million in 2013. We're not going to talk about the FCS anymore. You can see their revenues haven't changed much, and they are literally in another league from the FBS. Now, all that money that's being generated by the FBS schools comes primarily from two sources, basketball and football. And here on one graph, we see the revenues being generated by the median basketball and football schools and the maximum basketball and football schools. So in 2004, the median basketball school in the Football Bowl Subdivision had basketball revenues of about $4 million. By 2013, this had risen to about almost $6 million. Contrast that to the football median. The football median is close to $20 million, as opposed to basketball just under $6 million. And then look at the green and the purple. The green and the purple bars show the earnings of the green schools. The green bars are the top earning basketball revenue figures, and the purple one the top earning football. And look what's happened in basketball to the top revenue earning school from 2008, when it was about a little over $20 million, to 2013, it's a little over $40 million. In both years, that school was the University of Louisville. And you might ask, what the heck happened in Louisville? And the answer is, the Yum Center. That's the Yum Center effect, which is a huge cash cow for the University of Louisville basketball program. Not surprisingly, the top-earning football school is the University of Texas. And to put basketball and football in perspective, the University of Texas in 2013 generated nearly $110 million off their football program. Louisville basketball about $42 million off their basketball program. Still, that $42 million is a lot more than a lot of football programs make, but it's dwarfed by football. Okay, I understand the slides aren't showing, so we're going to ditch that, and you'll just see my gabbing mug. So, all right, so where does the money come from? Well, a lot of it comes from TV, as we saw. So let's talk about these FBS schools. If you look at the top 25% of the FBS schools in terms of revenues generated, they get about 1/4 of their revenue from ticket sales, about 1/4 of their revenue each year from contributions. And one thing to keep in mind about contributions, most of those schools, most of those contributions are really part of the ticket price. If you want to buy season tickets to UK basketball or to University of Virginia basketball or University of Alabama football, you name it, if you want to buy tickets to those games, you have to make a donation, quote unquote, to the athletic department. And if you want to know how much in order to get the tickets that you want, they will tell you. You need to give $10,000 or $50,000, depending on how many tickets you want and where you want them to be. Mid-court, end zone, it all depends on what kind of donation you make. So really, the contributions and the tickets together, it's about half of the revenue that they raise. Almost as much comes from TV revenue that is funneled through the conferences and through the NCAA. So as I was trying to show you earlier, but the slides didn't show up, all the major conferences have TV contracts with either their own networks, like the Big Ten Network or the SEC Network, or with ESPN, like the ACC. That money is funneled through to the schools. They also get money from the NCAA, TV money from March Madness. So the SEC is happily counting up their money now because every game that UK plays in the NCAA tournament earns a bigger paycheck for the SEC, as is the case for every other SEC school. And that's the way it works with the conferences. ACC will get a really nice paycheck. They had 6 teams in the tournament. They all won their first game. That means they played 6 second-round games. Sadly, UVA lost their second-round game. The other 5 won, which means they go on to collect even bigger paychecks for the conference. And that's all divided up among all the teams in the conferences. So Wake Forest doesn't go to the big dance this year. They're going to be collecting money from Duke and North Carolina and UVA and the other ACC schools. And just as Vanderbilt and Auburn are going to be getting money from UK's performance. I've got fascinating slides for you. Not so fascinating to talk about. Where do colleges spend their sports dollars? Well, one of the interesting things is the players don't get very much of it. The players get their grants and aid. This is their athletic scholarships, and these are capped at tuition, room and board, books, and very minor incidental expenses. This is actually less than the full cost of attendance. the power conferences have indicated that they are going to offer full cost of attendance scholarships, so they'll pay for transportation between home and school. They'll pay for other expenses, and this might be anywhere from an extra $2,000 or $3,000 per student to an extra $7,000 or $8,000 per student. It's going to vary from school to school. This is a huge development. It's not done entirely because of the warm, charitable feelings that the schools feel for their hardworking, deserving student athletes. They're doing this in part under legal duress, political pressure, because as we'll talk about in a minute, they're facing some pretty severe court challenges, which if they don't go the NCAA's way, will cost the NCAA and its members a lot more than just full cost of attendance scholarships. Where do colleges spend their sports dollars? Well, I've got a bar chart here that shows that for U of L basketball, it's well under $1 million for their athletic scholarships, and it's well over $4 million a year to the basketball coaches. This is Rick Pitino and his assistants. At UK, the basketball scholarships are about the same as at U of L, well under $1 million, well, actually well under $500,000. But at UK, the basketball coaches collectively are paid over $8 million a year. Similar stories with other schools, because they're all playing by the same rules, they're all paying by the same rules. So the coaches get a lot, the athletic directors get a lot, the Ohio State athletic director gets bonuses every time one of the individual athletes wins a championship. So last year a wrestler won a national championship, NCAA national championship. He didn't get anything for that except fame and glory. The athletic director at Ohio State got an $18,000 bonus. Did not appreciate the attention he got when some reporter pointed that out, but there are probably other athletic directors out there also getting bonuses for similar things. Players know they don't get that. They spend a lot of money on training facilities. $70 million for a new football training center at University of Southern California. University of Oregon, if Joe Workman is out there, some of you may know Joe Workman. He's a chemistry professor here, and he's on sabbatical, and he's spending the year at the University of Oregon doing research. So Joe, if you're listening, you might let Jamie know what your impression is of University of Oregon's athletic facilities. I was able to get a report that shows that about 32% of the entire University of Oregon campus, about 32% of the value of the entire buildings and equipment on the University of Oregon campus is athletic facilities, which to me is mind-boggling. But they have a great patron out there, Phil Knight of Nike. He loves Oregon sports. They get whatever they want. I have this really great picture of the training pools in their athletic center. Boy. Well, I can only dream about it. So you can't pay the players. It wasn't always this case. Before the NCAA, players did get paid. It was kind of scandalous in the eyes of the public. There was one football star at Yale, a guy named James Hogan. Yale, believe it or not, Yale was one of the powerhouses in college football at the turn of the last century. Hogan was an offensive lineman, and the way the game was played then, the offensive linemen were the stars. Yale gave him free tuition, free meals, an apartment, all expense paid trip to Cuba, which was a real vacation paradise destination at the time. They gave him a monopoly over the scorecard sales, the program sales at the football stadium. He got all the profits from that. They also got him a cushy job with the American Tobacco Company, a big cigarette company, and he got a lot of money for that, not really doing anything except saying, hey, I work for American Tobacco Company, buy our products. NCAA comes onto the scene, not to cut off payments to the athletes. There were other issues going on. But they soon turned their attention to outlawing not only payments to athletes, but even athletic scholarships. They said, we're going to be amateurs. Our players play for the love of the game. So there were no athletic scholarships. But there was really no enforcement, and lots of schools cheated. They paid money to players under the table. Center College had a football slush fund in 1929. That was pretty modest compared to other football slush funds at other schools, but the slush fund was there for the football coach to spend as he pleased. Give it to players, buy things for them, make their life more comfortable. It was just the way it was. It wasn't until mid-century that the NCAA really cracked down, started to enforce rules against paying athletes, and really started stressing we're amateurs. And soon after that, they coined the phrase student athletes. One of the reasons they started talking about student athletes is because players on athletic scholarships, some of them started to regard themselves as employees. And gosh, if you're an employee and you're hurt on the job, you're eligible for workman's compensation. The NCAA did not like the thought of that, and so they said, no, not employees, student athletes. You play for the love of the game. You're not employees, no workman's compensation. And they got away with that for a long time. They still largely get away with it. Now I want to talk about 3 things to watch in the courts. Some of them have been big news. One of them, not so much yet, but could be the biggest one of all. So first, the football players at Northwestern University filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board Chicago office. They claimed that they're employees of the Northwestern University football team. In their case, they argued that they work 50 to 60 hours a week during football practice and season, and the month or so before the football season starts, 50 to 60 hours a week. Once the football season starts and school starts, it's 40 to 50 hours a week during football season. They argued they can't take the courses they want to take. For instance, Kane Coulter was their quarterback, wanted to be pre-med. Unfortunately for him, pre-med students need to take organic chemistry. Organic chemistry was only offered at Northwestern during time slots reserved for football practice. Kane Coulter alleges that the football coaches would not let him out of practice or film time to go to organic chemistry. So he claims that he gave up his dream of being a physician and he majored in psychology instead. Northwestern, of course, disputes some of these details. Bottom line is they weren't arguing for more salary. They wanted the right to form a union, which would give them the right to bargain collectively with Northwestern about working conditions, more flexibility in the times set aside for practice. So if they wanted to take organic chemistry, they could do that. They wanted, and here's a key demand they would like to get, is better medical coverage. And a lot of people have said, well, they get great medical coverage. You know, if they're hurt, they get the best of medical care. After all, Northwestern has a great medical school. They top physicians. They want the medical coverage to continue after their playing career is over. And with all the publicity about concussions in the NFL, and now there's this is coming to light in big-time college sports too. Some former college players are experiencing the same kinds of problems that former NFL players get, and the players want coverage for that. They won. The Chicago office of the NLRB said, you are employees. You are entitled under the law to hold an election on whether or not you want to form a labor union. If a majority of the football players form a labor vote in favor, you can form a union and you will have the same collective bargaining rights that the United Auto Workers have, for instance. Northwestern, of course, is appealing this. This is a limited case in many ways. It applies only to private universities. So University of Kentucky, Ohio State, they're not covered by this ruling, but it could be extended to Vanderbilt, to University of Southern California, to Baylor, and not surprisingly, a lot of those private universities with big-time sports programs are filing briefs with the appeals court, which is the national office of the National Labor Relations Board. They're filing briefs arguing, making arguments why players really aren't employees. They are student athletes and they should not be able to form unions. That was an alarming development for the NCAA. They've got now, there's a legal precedent for regarding scholarship athletes as employees of the university. There was a bigger blow struck last year by Ed O'Bannon and other former basketball and football players in Division I. So this is a pretty interesting story. Ed O'Bannon, some of you might recall, was the star of UCLA's 1995 National Championship basketball team. He's now a car salesman in Las Vegas, and I think a pretty good car salesman living a pretty comfortable life. He played in the NBA for a while after graduating college. And he was hanging out at a friend's house. And his friend said, hey, you should see this. And turns out his teenage son had a video game, NCAA basketball. And he said, you're in the game, Ed. You're in this video game. And O'Bannon said, what are you talking about? So they put it on. And they set up a game featuring the 1995 UCLA team. And there was Ed O'Bannon, number 31, left-handed, 6'8", shaved head, African-American, all the same moves that the real Ed O'Bannon had. The only thing that was missing was his name, but it looked just like him. And I have a slide that shows you the real Ed O'Bannon playing basketball at UCLA and his video game avatar. There's no mistake. They even wear the same knee pads, knee brace. So O'Bannon thought, well, that's pretty cool. And then his friend said, but you know what's really wild? And O'Bannon says, what's that? Says, the NCAA and the video game company are making a lot of money off of this. You're not getting a penny. And O'Bannon thought about that. And he thought about that. And so he looked into it. And then, a long story short, he ends up with a lawyer who has been looking for someone to spearhead a class action lawsuit on this very issue. And it went to trial in the Northern District, federal court in the Northern District of California. It was an antitrust case. And so the antitrust laws of the United States says it is illegal to form a combination or conspiracy and restraint of trade. Basically, it means monopolies are illegal when they result as the result of collusion between different firms. The collusion here that O'Bannon and his fellow plaintiffs alleged was that the members of the NCAA got together and illegally agreed to prevent players from ever earning any royalties for the uses of their names, images, and likenesses, as in, for instance, video games. So what grated on O'Bannon and some of his fellow plaintiffs was not only were they prevented from earning any royalties while they were students, but the agreements they were forced to sign prevented them from earning any royalties after college, when they were no longer student athletes, but yet were still valuable to the NCAA and to the video game makers. The video game company involved and another company that handles licensing for athletes and celebrities and so on settled out of court, paid a handsome sum. The NCAA refused to settle, and the judge ruled in favor of Ed O'Bannon. It was a partial victory for O'Bannon. The judge, Claudia Wilkins, said that they were entitled to some compensation, and the compensation she imposed was players would be able to have a minimum of $5,000 a year paid into a trust fund during their college years in compensation for the use of their names, images, and likenesses in video games and TV broadcasts, and however the teams in the NCAA wanted to use their likenesses. And so when they left school, they would then have access to perhaps 4 years worth of these $5,000 payments. But nothing while they're in school, and limited. It's a minimum of $5,000. There's no maximum, but it's hard to imagine that if this judgment stands, schools are going to be offering more than $5,000. This has alarmed the NCAA greatly. The NCAA was arguing it's all about amateur sports. If they're not amateurs, nobody's going to watch the game anymore. There was lots of argument about that. The judge didn't buy it. So that's now being appealed and is going to the Circuit Court of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit, which is out in California. I'm not sure when they're going to issue a decision. They had oral arguments a week or two ago. One of the things that hurts the NCAA in the trial was, and the lawyers probably should have caught this, but they hired an economist as their expert on economics. And the economist argued that the NCAA was not a cartel. There were legitimate reasons for them to have these regulations and restrictions. Unfortunately for the NCAA, the economist is the co-author of a best-selling undergraduate microeconomics textbook. And here's what he says in that textbook. The NCAA restricts competition in a number of ways. To reduce bargaining power by student athletes, the NCAA creates and enforces rules regarding eligibility and terms of compensation, and he called them a cartel. And when he was cross-examined, this did not go well for the NCAA. I'm not sure he'll be working for the NCAA during the other cases that come up. And the other case, the one that hasn't yet gotten much attention because it has not gone to trial, is actually several cases that have been consolidated into one. The most prominent is the Martin-Jenkins case, also known as the Kessler case, for reasons I'll explain. Jenkins just finished his football career at Clemson in the fall. He was a star cornerback, I think. He was a defensive player. I think he was a cornerback. Pro prospect, big collegiate star. His fellow plaintiffs include a couple of other college football players, a college basketball player, and one player who was offered basketball and football scholarships and ultimately played football. They are arguing that the NCAA is an illegal cartel and restraint of trade, and what they want is not royalties for names, images, and likenesses. They want to get paid straight up a salary. Well, how much could a player get paid? What's a player worth? There have been a variety of estimates done by economists in peer-reviewed journals. Stars basketball stars and football stars at the highest level could be worth $2 or $3 million a year to their teams. And so if there was a competitive market for these star players coming out of high school, you could see salaries of hundreds of thousands, maybe even $1 million or more for the top stars. This, of course, just makes the NCAA terrified, and they argue that this would be the death of collegiate sports, that the amateur model, the only way these schools can provide these big-time sports is they don't pay the athletes. If they had to pay the athletes, it would all fall apart. And so their arguments are, well, if we make us pay the athletes, then we're going to see schools cutting the non-revenue sports. No more wrestling, no more golf, no more gymnastics. We're going to have to get rid of all that stuff because we won't be able to afford to subsidize those. Economists don't have much patience with those arguments. We've looked at the numbers. They generate plenty of revenue. How much revenue would the players get altogether? If you look at the professional sports leagues, the NFL and the NBA, players get 55 to 60% of the total revenues in the NBA and the NFL. Could well happen in Division I basketball and football too. Now that means that there wouldn't be as much money for lavish training facilities. That means that some coaches might take some pay cuts. That means coaches for non-revenue sports might take pay cuts. The basketball coaches at UK, the women's head coach and the women's assistant coaches get paid collectively over $1 million a year. I don't know what the revenues of the UK women are off the top of my head, but they're less than the coaches are getting paid. How do they get paid that much? Well, they're probably getting subsidized by football and basketball. But so those kinds of things would change, but that doesn't mean they'd have to get rid of those non-revenue sports. They would just spend the money differently. The football and basketball players would get more money. And I would just point out, I'll stop talking. Some of you are probably thinking back to the days when you're sitting in my classroom and say, well, will you ever shut up and let us ask a question? So I'll just point this out. Center College, I have to look at my figures here. Center College, which gets intercollegiate revenue, sports revenues of approximately $0, offers, I think, 23 varsity sports. That's men and women together. The University of Kentucky offers 22 varsity sports. University of Wisconsin, which is in the Final Four with UK, offers 24 varsity sports. The University of Michigan, or Michigan State, which is also in the Final Four, offers 25. These are schools that generate $60, $70, $80 million a year in athletic revenues, and they offer the same number of intercollegiate varsity teams as Center College does. So tell me, if they have to pay the athletes, they're going to have to cut those other varsity teams. I don't buy it, and not many other people do. I don't think the court's going to buy it, And the other thing that scares the court is that this antitrust suit is in the same courtroom with the same judge who ruled in favor of Ed O'Bannon. And she said in that case, she said at one point when she was listening to the arguments, I don't think amateurism is going to be a useful word here. Is what she said in response to the NCAA's arguments about the importance of amateurism. All right, well, I don't know who's out there. I don't know if anybody's listening. If you've listened to all of this, I thank you. Jamie Powell is standing by. For all I know, she already has some questions and comments. I'm eager for a conversation.
Well, Bruce, that was awesome. I must say, I'm a little soured now on watching basketball, and I feel like I get so wrapped up in the actual game element of everything and the excitement. And, you know, I see the commercials, I see all the advertising, this huge money-making juggernaut. And, you know, it depresses me a little bit that it feels like, you know, it's completely loaded against the so-called student athlete. I just wonder, I mean, do you think this is fixable? I mean, can we ever truly get back to this being, you know, about competition, or is it all business now all the time and we're just going to have to figure out how to, you know, pay people?
Well, I think it's not going to be hard to figure out how to pay people. There are a lot of questions to be answered. Actually, ironically, right now, there is no competition between NCAA schools in the business arena. They're competing on the court and on the field, and what these court cases are about is trying to get some real business competition. Look, as long as we all want to watch March Madness, as long as we all want to watch the college football playoffs and the bowl games, as long as we're all willing to pay for that, the money's going to be there. And the question is, who's going to get it? The NCAA is not going to go out of business if they have to start paying the athletes. It's not going to be as lucrative to be a head coach or an assistant coach. Coach Cal is an amazing recruiter and an amazing coach. And I don't want to criticize Coach Cal or Rick Pitino or any other fantastic coaches. They get paid. They get paid in a competitive marketplace. But if the players get paid, their salaries are going to go down. And Coach Cal is an amazing recruiter. He's getting paid in part because he is an amazing recruiter. If Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director at UK, can recruit star basketball players to UK by offering to pay them big salaries, well, then that part of Coach Cal's toolkit is going to be, his recruiting value is going to be lower because he won't have to sweet talk the families and the recruits as much. He can just dangle a paycheck in front of them and maybe get them to come. So, yeah, anyway. I talk a lot. Just interrupt me if I go on too long. Is there anybody else out there with any question?
Yeah, I've got a couple more questions from some viewers. Here's one. How likely do you believe it is that so-called power conferences will eventually become a separate level within the NCAA from the rest of Division I, or perhaps even leave the NCAA altogether? If something like that happens, what do you think the ramifications are for the remaining NCAA schools?
That's an excellent question, and I think that something like that is entirely possible. The power conferences have already moved in that direction. The college football playoffs, for instance, and before that the Bowl Championship Series were completely separate from the NCAA. The NCAA gets nothing from that. And the power conferences, when they saw which way the political winds were blowing, they said, we need to offer cost of attendance scholarships, not just the limited ones that the NCAA allows. They were voted down by the rest of the NCAA membership. They came back and basically said, well, we're going to do this, and you can go along with it or not. And there was a veiled threat there that if you don't let us do this, we could just secede from the NCAA. Most of the basketball champions come from the power conferences. All the football champions come from the power conferences. Those are the big money sports. We'll go it on our own. And what would it do to the rest of the NCAA? Well, I think the rest of the NCAA would become a lot more like Division III. There would probably be a middle ground. There'd be kind of like a minor league level. Some of the non-football playing basketball powers could probably survive on their own. UConn, Georgetown, the old Big East schools that are now the new Big East schools like Georgetown, Providence College, Villanova, they could probably be competitive in basketball. But a lot of schools, I think, would just become more like Division III, and then everybody would spend most of their money watching the core power conference schools.
Got another question here from a viewer. How could paying players affect the one and done concept?
All right, that's a great question. The one and done is a combination of NBA and NBA regulations and NCAA regulations. So the NBA regulation is you have to wait a year after your high school class graduates before you can join the NBA. So what are you going to do? You want to play basketball, you want to continue to get better, you want to be noticed by the scouts, you go to college. And if you're really good, you end up at UK or some other school like that. Duke has now got a lot of one and dones, and you jump to the NBA. So if you're a Louisville fan, I'm a Louisville fan, I should put my cards out on the table. I'm a Louisville fan, I'm a Kentucky fan, and I'm a Virginia fan. If that makes me a strange creature, we can talk about that some other day. So I was disappointed. I don't blame him, but I was disappointed to read this morning that Terry Rozier is turning pro. I thought he'd wait another year. He needs to work on some parts. He's a marvelous athlete. He'll make it in the NBA. If he had another year of college, he'd go higher in the draft. He'd get a bigger guaranteed contract. Why is he turning pro now? Well, his mom works 2 jobs to try to support the rest of the family. Terry Rozier is this marvelous talent. He can't contribute anything. So he's going to take his chances in the NBA, get some of the big bucks now so he can help out his mom, so at least she can give up one of her jobs. Who can blame him? If U of L was paying him, he could afford to support his mom and stay in and improve his game and improve his draft stock and get a better deal with the NBA in a year or two. So a lot of the players who are one and done and where there's some risk, okay, I can go to the NBA, am I going to make it? You know, maybe I won't go in the first round. If I'm not drafted in the first round, I don't get a guaranteed contract. So if they're getting paid $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 or more in college, that might give them the luxury of staying in school, maybe even making progress towards a degree and working on their playing skills. So I think you'd see fewer one and dones.
Okay, got another question here from a viewer. If schools were required to pay athletes market value, in what ways would that jeopardize women's athletics?
Well, so I don't think it would jeopardize women's athletics at all. Economists who've studied the numbers claim that there's not a whole lot of subsidy going from big money men's sports to women's sports. High-paid female basketball coaches might be the main exception to that. You're going to have the women's sports. For one thing, Title IX requires equivalent sporting opportunities for female athletes as for male athletes. So they'd have Title IX problems with the federal government if they said, okay, we can't afford those anymore, so we're going to cut out a bunch of women's teams. I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. So if so many universities in Division I have athletic programs that operate at a loss, and there are a lot, why do so many schools maintain athletic programs at that level, and and continue striving in that direction, do you think?
Well, the audience is asking really great questions. Well, here, I'll let you in on a secret. They don't operate at a loss. They spend their money to make it look like they're operating at a loss, but here's what goes on. First of all, one of their big costs is the cost of athletic scholarships. That's not really a cost to the school. Well, think about it. You bring in a bunch of scholarship athletes. The athletic department pays for those scholarships. Who gets the money for those scholarships? The university does. The university is taking the money out of the right pocket and putting it in the left pocket. That is not a true economic cost of intercollegiate sports. They spend a lot of money on recruiting, trying to get players to come to their schools. They do this by paying high-powered coaches huge salaries. They do this by building lavish training facilities that really wouldn't be necessary if they could just say, hey, come to us and we'll pay you $300,000 a year. Okay? So they could save a lot of money on these other expenses on facilities and so on like that. So in economics, if you took Econ 110, you might remember that when entrepreneurs see a profit is being made, what do? They flock to that market. If entrepreneurs see ice cream sellers making big profits, they say, hey, I want a part of that action. They join the ice cream industry. They start producing ice cream. And as long as profits are there, as long as big fat profits are there, you're going to see more firms entering the industry. What's happening in Division I football and basketball? More and more schools are joining. If you look 30 years ago, there were fewer than 100 schools playing Division I football. Now there's 125. There were well under 300 schools playing Division I basketball. Now there are 330 or something like that. The number grows every year. And there are other reasons. It's not just the ticket revenue and the TV and so on like that. Schools think they're getting other benefits too. Publicity, for instance. If your school makes it to the NCAA tournament, that's a lot of publicity. That raises the profile. That might help you attract more students. That might make it easier to get the attention of donors. There's a lot of research into whether or not you do get more and better students. The research is mixed, but it's pretty clear schools believe that there's something to this, or else they you wouldn't have more and more schools trying to get a piece of the action. So anyway.
There's another question that's been come in through Twitter. What do you make of the argument that scholarships count as payment?
Well, that's the argument of the Northwestern football players. And if you listen to the Northwestern University players and their lawyers, it's clearly payment. This is compensation that they get in return for their services as football players. If they quit the team, they no longer get the compensation. So King Coulter's choice, he's the guy who wanted to be pre-med. His choice was he could take the organic chemistry course, but he'd have to quit the football team. If he quit the football team, he would lose a scholarship. If he lost a scholarship, he couldn't take the organic chemistry class. Now, it's kind of like payment in a company town where you got paid in scrip that you had to pay, that you could only spend at the company store. And that's what players are getting. They're getting paid in scrip. It can be worth a lot to them. You know, they have the opportunity to get an education from, in many cases, a very fine institution. But the important point is it's less than what they're producing for their employers. If you have a player who's good enough to get drafted by the NBA, he could be worth a couple $1 million a year to a school. and he's getting paid by scholarship $60,000 or something like that. Yeah, he's got the opportunity for an education, but I don't think many of our viewers would be happy if they were producing $2 million worth of value for their employer and they were getting $60,000 a year and told you should be happy for it.
Excellent point. You know, you do keep mentioning that you talk a lot, but I'm telling you, everything you're saying is absolutely fascinating. So I could go on like this all night. However, we have been going for about an hour, so I just want to do a couple little housekeeping tips, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for some final comments. Remind everyone that this broadcast will be available on the Center Alumni YouTube channel, and we'll post follow-up information on Facebook and Twitter. We will also be posting Dr. Johnson's presentation slides so that you can rewatch this or watch it for the first time and follow along with some of the data that was presented. Also would like to remind everyone about April's upcoming Flameside chat, which will be about the topic of all topics, bourbon. Can't wait for that one. That will be with Dr. Leonard D. Moranville here at Center, chemistry professor, Dr. Ray Hammond, Adam Johnson, class of 97, and Matthew Cummings, class of 05. So before we close out tonight, I just want to thank Bruce for just providing some really fascinating information and discussion. And I want to turn it over to you for just some final comments. But first I want to ask you, what's your bracket looking like?
Oh, my bracket's not so good. So I'm a fan of Louisville, Kentucky, and Virginia. I thought it was Virginia's turn to finally win it all. I'm delighted that Kentucky's still alive. I love all those teams. I hate it when they play each other. So now Kentucky's got a clear path to the championship. I'd like to see them win. And then UVA next year. And then U of L should get another chance too. Oh, final comments. Thanks, whoever's out there, thank you. There's a lot more about this. You should Google the Jenkins-Kessler case. Oh, it's Kessler is the name of the lawyer. He's a very prominent antitrust attorney. The Jenkins-Kessler case, you can read about that. You read about the O'Bannon case. Read about Northwestern. There's a ton of stuff out there. And I'll just shut up, and I'm ready for the bourbon Flameside chat. So can we start that right now?
Yeah, well, I think we need to practice, so we'll work on that right now.
Okay, I'm ready to practice.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. It was awesome talking to you.
Okay.
All right, everybody have a great night. We'll see you in April.
Good night.